Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wowhead Weekly number 282. My name is Annie, or also known as Annie Fuchsia, and you can normally find me streaming full time on Twitch. And before we jump into anything, I would also like to introduce my co host, Berkulia.
I'm Perk. I run Wowhead. I'm joined by Brightpaw, who is on my lap. He makes appearances. Brightpaw, say hello. You can see his arm. And yeah, we took a break last week because I was visiting my family, but we're back, and there's a lot of, serious industry news or things that are delayed, canceled, just sort of the aftermath of what the lawsuit has caused. So, we'll recap all of it and, see what Blizzard can do to change things moving forward. So yeah, for the first topic, I think we should discuss BlizzConline cancel. That actually only
It
came to
just
light a few
happened.
hours before
Mm-hmm.
the show. Brightpaw's like, look at my head, because he knows it's a serious topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm going to move him before he interrupts the segment. Come on, good boy. Down you go.
No.
I just pictured him strangling me with the microphone as I'm explaining the Blizzard statement. But
Oh.
yeah, so um, Blizzard released a statement a few hours ago, basically saying that they've decided to take a step back and pause on planning the previously announced BlizzConline event scheduled for early next year. Um, and then they said that as any BlizzCon event takes every single one of us to make happen, an entire company effort, fueled by our desire to share what we create with the community we care about so much. We feel the energy it would take to put on a show like this is best directed towards supporting our teams and progressing development of our games and experiences.
Yeah.
So, to me, what this sounds like is that they need to work on getting their products out, which are slow going with COVID, as opposed to taking away resources to do presentations, and maybe some of these presentations won't be ready by February, or who knows, maybe they want to drop something like, say, earlier in December to be strategic. So, yeah, no virtual BlizzConline event
Mm-hmm.
for development reasons.
Mm-hmm.
um which is people are really curious when we're going to get an expansion announcement. It does seem like they will still be doing announcements, but by channel. They're saying you'll continue hearing about the exciting upcoming news through our franchise channels, with the talented people on the BlizzCon team playing a part in supporting these efforts. So maybe they'll stagger them out more, as opposed to announcing them all at once.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think that's
so.
exactly what it sounds like, which is a negative and a positive. Because sometimes
Mhm.
you want to hear about certain news, but you know that they're specifically saving it for this, big day when all the news are supposed to be given out at the same time. But all in all, it's good that BlizzConline is not happening because of everything else that's going on. It's
Yeah.
they need to focus on the team and the game itself, of course, as well, instead of BlizzConline, which is in a way a luxury, right? BlizzCon
Right.
itself in the past as well, it's a luxury. Not every company does something like that. Now it's online, so it's a BlizzConline instead, but it's still a similar idea there that it's not something that necessarily makes profit for them either. So it's
Yeah,
not really that surprising.
and it's also just thinking about the sustainability of it. I mean, so many people were talking about how they were, I'm a developer, but I had to, work security, or this was like a bonus that I had to do on top of my community job, or it was like a
Yeah,
passion project.
yeah,
And even before the lawsuit, in light of, the employees not being paid as much, it just didn't seem sustainable to ask people doing one job to suddenly be an expert at a completely different job for a convention instead of hiring, experts and outside help for all that.
Yeah, that's a
Something
very
which
good
I didn't
point
put in the
too.
notes, but
Mm-hmm.
which just came to my attention is that Carolyn Smith, who was the executive producer of BlizzCon, seems to have left the company recently. Um,
Mm.
so
How recently
it's
is that?
like if yeah. Um, so it's like, oh well, if they've lost their BlizzCon leadership, then
Yeah, that's awkward.
yeah, yeah,
Maybe that's also
that
part of
could
the
be
reason. How recent
yeah.
was it that he left? Do you know?
I think she left in like
Oh, she.
September-ish.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Based looking at like when the LinkedIn was updated, there wasn't like a big fanfare on Twitter, but if you look at her social media, it appears that she recently left.
Okay.
So like that could be sort of like the final nail in the coffin that they were on the fence, and now now that they've lost their leadership, they have to seriously rethink it. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, going back to the staggered stuff, I almost wonder if they want to like put some of the WoW news earlier to remind people they exist when Endwalker comes out, and like save
Oh, you mean with
Hearthstone.
putting
Usually,
915 so early?
well, I mean, I think 915 is like kind of it's like weird. It's like early, but also late. But I think that they'd want to start teasing like 9.2 and the next expansion maybe earlier than February. If like Endwalker will get the attention
Mm.
of a lot of WoW players, so I could see that them wanting to do that earlier. But then like maybe Hearthstone could be a little
Mm.
later.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's just if they're not the top dog, if they need to be smarter about their announcements, uh, they may realize that this is not just waiting and holding everything until February and using this 10-year-old format um, may not be the smartest choice.
Do you think it
Um,
would be smarter to put? So what you mean is putting some WoW news earlier than February,
yeah.
instead, in order to get the attention, while Endwalker is still going on. Do you think
Yeah, yeah.
that is a good idea, or isn't it just better to wait until the Endwalker hype has calmed down properly?
So I mean, I'm not sure because I thought the whole Endwalker momentum kind of started like when 9.1 hype was starting to ramp up. Um, but yeah, I mean, maybe you have good points. Maybe there's pros and cons, but just that Blizzard has the flexibility to think of, oh, we don't need to save every piece of news
Mm-hmm.
for every franchise for February.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it just allows them greater freedom in how to
Mm-hmm.
just even being able to have the discussion of should we tease something earlier
True.
as
Yeah.
opposed to no, we cannot think about how to change up any of our marketing because this is how we've always done it for every year. We save our
Yeah.
news for
Yeah.
this event. I think it's just good if it even prompts them to think outside the
Mm-hmm.
box a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Being able to be
Um,
more adaptable in that
yeah.
sense. And I mean, Endwalker's coming out 23rd of November, and
Mm-hmm.
February is 3 months after that. So, I mean, I can see the expansion hype, starting to go down around that time, maybe even a little
Mm.
bit before, depending on. I'm actually not sure how it works with a game like Final Fantasy. With WoW, we kind of know it's the high points are the different raids and the different if there's any kind of world first races, MDIs, or anything like that. But with Final Fantasy, I'm not sure. Because I've never really experienced the Final Fantasy expansion before, but I can imagine that obviously for a few weeks at the least, while people are progressing through the main story, that would be a lot of hype, and after that, I'm not really sure what to expect. Have you ever like kept track of Final Fantasy in the past with previous expansions?
So we haven't, but Wowhead's sister site Fanbyte is actually ramping up a lot of guides.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I mean, it's interesting because obviously Final Fantasy has a lot of hype, but there hasn't been like, new content in a while, but we are definitely seeing like people interested in the Evergreen guides we're putting out or like, what class is popular, stuff like that. And, normally when WoW doesn't have something, it's like kind of a dead zone. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting like to see how um well, it's like we've said before how Final Fantasy sort of has like more staying power in some regards.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so also I was gonna say with 9.2, I feel like 9.15 is, we'll get into it, it's like a very sort of quality of life update, but people are like, okay, what's the next raid? What's the new zone? So I don't think Blizzard would want to wait until February to announce that. Uh, so I could also see sort of by necessity, like normally they'd have a PTR up by that point. So I could see them, maybe they could announce something in December for that and then be like, when we're back from vacation in January, the PTR is going up. I could see something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If February would be like too late to announce 9.2, but too early for an expansion, uh, I could see them trying to split that up.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So in that case, you're expecting the PTR of 9.2 potentially to be out around January, February?
yeah, I mean, I would think so. I know I have a little bit of rose tinted goggles thinking of Legion, but I remember that, I mean, like what you would have, like Nighthold would come out, and when the mythic difficulties were being killed, you would have the PTR starting up for the next patch. So it used to
Mm-hmm.
be a pretty tight cycle that several weeks after a patch went live, you would start getting hints for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So even if we're gonna say generously, like, oh, a few weeks is, that was old Blizzard. Now stuff is stretched out a bit more. Uh, January is still like a few months after this November 2nd 9.15 date, so I feel like they'd have to have something up by then.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Because that would be
you know,
2 months, so that could
yeah,
potentially work. At least some kind of hints of PTR soon.
yeah, or like what they did, I think with 9.1, or I think even 9.15, how they had some announcements before the PTR was testable. So, maybe I know that they don't have like PTRs going with updates over Christmas break. So maybe they
Mm-hmm.
could do like the nice previews and like the
Mm-hmm.
screenshots, or drop a video, excuse me, explaining stuff before to get people hype about it. And then, do that around Christmas, and then get
Mm-hmm.
back to it with PTR up in January.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, with this BlizzCon announcement, I mean, there's the other angle of not just the game development and the COVID delays and, trying to fix Shadowlands and 9.2. There's the angle of that BlizzCon is tarnished by the lawsuit. It was
Absolutely.
like a breeding ground for the Rockstar devs to prey on fans and, feel like they could do whatever they wanted. The Blue Post did not explicitly say the lawsuit, but it was strongly hinted at. They said, additionally, we would also like to take the time to reimagine what a BlizzCon event of the future could look like. The first BlizzCon was held 16 years ago, and so much has changed in the time since, most notably the multiple ways in which players and communities can come together and feel like they're part of something bigger. We also need to ensure that it feels as safe, welcoming, and inclusive as possible. We are
Mm-hmm.
excited about what we'll do with this event when we revisit it um, in the future.
Yeah.
So, like based on our, if you go back to our coverage, you have there was this Bloomberg report that said some male employees began to see women at the conventions not just as customers but as groupies. One woman who worked there recalled a conversation in which one of Blizzard's top executives told a group of his staff that young women, both fans and colleagues, saw them as superstars, and why shouldn't they benefit sexually from that? And then, of course,
Yep.
the Cosby Suite, the party suite run by Alex Afrasiabi, that had all the inappropriate jokes from other
Mm-hmm.
developers, had all like the drinking was just very inappropriate behavior as the night would go on. That
Mm-hmm.
was specifically called out in the lawsuit. So BlizzCon is the center of a lot of bad PR that they have to definitely revamp
Yeah.
when they have to get in person, because people will flat out not feel safe. And if this behavior continues, people might feel more confident to come forward and name their abusers, which is, it's definitely a good thing, but it's it's good because people won't be able to sort of hide stuff. But it will definitely show if Blizzard doesn't clean up their act that it's a mess, and Blizzard doesn't, they don't need more bad PR. They don't need another scandal at BlizzCon.
And in this case, the BlizzCon would be online, which is, not the exact same thing, but it definitely still has, a sort of reputation to it. So people who are
Mm-hmm.
upset about what happened in previous BlizzCons will be less likely to want to engage in and, be part of this BlizzConline event. And I think that's also a concern for Blizzard because what's the point of putting together this sort of passion project if people aren't interested in it anyways, because it's now got a sort of tarnished reputation. People enjoyed, checking out the different panels before, even panels that were about things that may not interest them. Somebody who is normally a WoW fan could be checking out the Overwatch section, maybe, just for the sake of, being part of everything that's going on. Kind of like how you would do things when you were there physically. You would go
Yeah.
into different halls to check out what the different things, what the different panels are talking about, and people would do that on the online version too. And if BlizzCon now has this like bad reputation with Cosby Suite and everything else that was going on, then people would be less likely to want to be there, want to give Blizzard a click of engagement of anything, because they don't want to support anything that has to do with it. And I think that's probably also part of the reason that Blizzard thinks it's not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a short-term and long-term problem where in the short term it's like, bad branding for the online event with low morale,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
not many things to announce. Blizzard really needs to
that too.
focus on quality games. And then in the long term, it's like, what is the future of the BlizzCon brand, whether it's online or in person after COVID,
Yeah.
Like it's
Mm-hmm.
like you said, this virtual event may not have issues like, the Cosby Suite or like a Hilton
Safety.
bar,
Mm-hmm.
but if it's like, what does BlizzCon 2023 look like in person? Or, like, oh, BlizzCon 2022 was going to be they were announcing that, global event where there'd be the virtual panels, but also like local meetups. It's like, what happens if something would happen at this local meetup? Is that Blizzard's responsibility? Are they encouraging these events but not enforcing them? It just seems that they need to sort things out. Plus, the whole angle. I remember of like the unpaid labor. I remember one of the tweets that got a lot of attention was the I think Alex Frostwolf on Twitter, and she was talking about like her hair falling out, trying to organize like all the
Oh yeah, I
cosplay
remember,
panels
because she was so
on the
stressed.
side. Yeah, and it's like you definitely don't need like, oh, I'm crunching at home with COVID and now I'm trying to organize these like panels as unpaid overtime, especially when the employees are demanding that they be paid higher salaries, and many are leaving for places that have, better benefits, office cultures, working from home policies. So
Mm-hmm.
it definitely seems like BlizzCon was kind of like a metaphor, I feel, for the issues at Blizzard, where it was like really glamorous on the surface, and fans sort of found their own happiness connecting with each other. But if you poke a little deeper, there are issues with like, labor,
That's true.
reimbursement.
Yeah,
Is
even
even
at the show.
practical?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the Rockstar developers, the harassment going on. It's sort of like a metaphor for a lot, for like, everything going on with the
Mm-hmm.
company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point because everything would happen in a different type of scale at the event
Mm.
as would happen at the company itself too. I have a general question. Something
Yeah.
that I thought was talked about at some point.
Mhm.
Is it true that BlizzCon in general was never really a profit event for Blizzard? Because that's something
So
that I remember a lot of people used to say, but I don't
yeah,
know if it's true.
I think that was always like all off the record, or that it was like it was always like billed as a passion project.
Yeah.
And that like the amount of effort that went into it, um, didn't like maybe it didn't necessarily like lead to huge profits, but it had like intangible benefits. Um,
Exactly.
but
Community
I think
benefits and mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean, I think that if you have an event where you're not going to pay, like, I mean, obviously they had like a BlizzCon production team, but I think when you have an event where you're like forcing your employees to, work the floor instead of professionals for that, or
Yeah.
you're asking people to do like double duty on other things, like, if it's like if we're telling people you have to develop the game as well as do these presentations, it definitely seems like they didn't have a good division of labor there if they didn't want to, hire these extra people to specialize. More people should have been specialized at just BlizzCon, I think. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, obviously there's this executive producer who left who focused on BlizzCon, but it definitely seems weird that so many mid-tier people were having to sort of work multiple jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really interesting because if it is true in that sense with Passion Project, and a lot of people have lost passion, and including some people who left the company, like you mentioned, the person who was the director before for BlizzCon, then
Mhm.
it makes total sense that it's just impossible to do now. It's not even a weighing of maybe, maybe not. It's it's literally impossible.
And it could also be like sponsors as well, thinking of it from a more detached angle. You have the employees on one hand that, are not in the mood to sort of just start working for free when they have low morale, but then you have corporate sponsors that, the Overwatch League lost a ton of corporate sponsors following
Mm-hmm.
the lawsuit, not all of them, but a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um and, at last BlizzConline, there weren't just panels, there were like I think Critical Role did a Diablo campaign. Like you definitely had and you had sponsors of the actual BlizzConline event. And
Yeah.
they may not have sponsors willing to line up for either a virtual or in-person event with all the branding changes being just everything being a mess.
Mm-hmm.
um Also, this wasn't in the notes because we were touching on other things, but one of the references changed. Not one of the big ones, but a smaller one was to a musician who did an introduction, I think, to the Tauren chieftains like over a decade ago, and his introduction had words bleeped out, but they were clearly like homophobic slurs and cursing. And looking back, you're like, oh my god, like why didn't Blizzard PR like realize that this was like not appropriate for a family friendly event?
Oh,
And
so he had like a speech at the BlizzCon, you mean?
yeah, he was just talking about like, like the homophobic thing towards the alliance. Like it was like purposely trying to be edgy, but it's just like looking back,
Mm.
you're like, why was like did no one at Blizzard realize that this was like bad for an industry convention? Like even if maybe the
Yeah.
intent was like a
Mm-hmm.
persona or tongue in cheek, like it's like no one seemed to realize that this could have, repercussions. Or
Mm-hmm.
like that uh that whole panel with like Sylvanas and like the, like the
Mm-hmm.
underwear catalogs and everyone laughing. Like I think it shows that when you just have the employees doing the event and it's not professionally managed, you run into situations where it's just like, why was there no PR expert being like, this is going to cause a problem? Like, clean stuff up. Like, do not
Mm-hmm.
have the person with, leading your opening with insults. So
I'm curious,
yeah, I mean,
like maybe that was also just a culture switch in general. Do you think that was
yeah,
only Blizzard? Because it's been a while, right? And I feel like being
right.
like that, being edgy and very provocative in words and everything, I feel like that was in general just more common back then. So then they didn't think to like PR it. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess you could have had a very
So
strong PR team even at the time.
yeah, I mean, I definitely think with how like Blizzard was sort of at its peak back then with like more subscribers and goodwill that they should have invested more. And
Yeah.
I was actually not aware of it at the time because I think that was right before like Twitch and social media. It was like an early-ish BlizzCon,
Mm.
but not super
Mm-hmm.
early. But looking back, when we were researching this for the name change, it created such an uproar at the time that Mike Morhaime actually issued an apology, saying that in retrospect, this was like not appropriate for BlizzCon. So
Oh,
I
Mike
think
Morhaime did
that
that? When was that?
like like 10 years ago.
Oh,
Let
so
me try to
okay, okay.
look.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but basically, so
Yeah.
you mean that he actually apologized for that back then, so to speak. So not like now in recent days.
Yeah. So
That's interesting.
yeah. So it's like this happened I think this was, oh yeah, it was a BlizzCon 2011 appearance that created the controversy, and
Mm,
Mike Morhaime apologized soon after that. So
gotcha. Okay,
uh
yeah, then
and
it's
that
definitely
was,
something that they could have looked out for.
yeah, if it created that much of a big deal and like Twitch
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a thing, like, Discord wasn't a thing,
Yeah,
like
I was
social
not.
media, like,
Yeah,
yeah, but
and
it's
it
like
still caused
if
enough for him to apologize.
yeah, like, it was pretty big. So, but yeah, it's just like, you know, even if some of the more minor things could be explained as a cultural shift, it's like, well, in this environment, uh, you have these outdated, like, inappropriate things that are now associated with your event, and they have to clean up like the really
Mm-hmm.
offensive stuff as well as the more minor things that also come across as
Mm-hmm.
strange in this
Mm-hmm.
climate. So
Yeah, and you can
it
definitely
yeah.
also just not blame culture shift either if, like you
Yeah.
said, if the apology was made soon after, that means that it was wrong even for its time.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I definitely think that Blizzard needs to focus on creating the quality games and truly sorting out what a professional event is like, professional in being a welcoming space for fans, but also professional as in let's not force our employees to, work all this overtime.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's a tall
Indeed.
order. So I think it's good they're not doing BlizzCon now, but I definitely think that if you're a fan of Blizzard, it's not the greatest for morale. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, Even with the virtual event, Blizzard first made it seem like they were going to have in-person gatherings, like local things in major cities. They didn't elaborate, but maybe, I don't know, maybe if you were vaccinated, you could, I don't know, watch it at a bar or something. That was kind of the hint. So maybe people are disappointed they can't meet up in person. But yeah, it's definitely a weird time to be, um,
Yep.
a fan of the company. So,
Oh, yeah. Really
and I mean, we
grim
also have to keep
times.
in mind that they were employees were being let go. Like, Blizzard was saying last year, oh, it's a big Diablo momentum. Everything is Diablo at BlizzCon 2021. And as a result of the lawsuit, they let the Diablo 4 game director go. And they've, obviously found a new replacement. But, stuff like that, I'm sure, slows down the development process. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. I'd rather them just focus on rebuilding
Rebuilding.
like
Mm-hmm.
morale within the team, focus
Mm-hmm.
on hiring people,
Yep.
focus on creating the product, and try to sort out BlizzCon so there's not work distractions as well as aspects that could kind of revive this, rock star culture. Like, oh, I want to be the one to do the panel, or like, oh, I'm getting this like, energy rush, all this attention on me. I think it's good to just focus on the games.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Uh,
A big
but yeah,
focus on the games and also on the culture at the company itself.
yeah. So, yeah, that definitely kind of like big bombshell news this morning. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just hope that the with the extra time that they can develop quality products like Blizzard was making it seem like Diablo was gonna have this huge, boost, but then even Diablo Immortal got delayed, and like Resurrected was better than Reforged, but it has like major server issues with it.
Mm-hmm.
So even the Diablo hype wave didn't go as planned for 2021. Um,
Yep.
and a lot of I remember before the lawsuit broke, there was a lot of discussion on Blizzard salaries, and there was a sense that, oh, pandemic instability, but just wait until all the Diablo products come out. That will be our, big payoff time. It's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
it's not working out how you guys thought with delay, game director changed, login issues. Um, so yeah, I just hope they can focus on delivering the quality products.
Mm-hmm. It's funny to think how much the reputation has changed over the years
Mm.
with everything that's been going on. People have been unhappy with Blizzard in general now for years, and uh, I was starting to get really upset as well when all those people were getting laid off and everything.
Mm.
For someone who has been a really big fan, and everything going on this year has just made everything so much more grim. But at least maybe it's some kind of wake up call to force changes is the way that I see it, and I think I think if those changes don't happen, it's not going to be a good future for Blizzard, and maybe that pressure is good, so we can actually start seeing those changes that we need.
Yeah, and I mean, they could rethink BlizzCon into something more positive. Like I know Destiny, their updates were well received. I think they did something in June that was very positive and also kind of touched upon like some of the like turmoil going on in real life. I think that's actually why like a 9/1 event was delayed, or maybe that was 2020. I think that was 2020 actually, but uh I think that people have liked a lot of Bungie's blog updates as well. So, there could be a path forward where Blizzard doesn't do something as grandiose, but it
Mm-hmm.
gets the job done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of places don't do something as elaborate as BlizzCon, but they generate hype, or
Mm-hmm.
even Final Fantasy, they do those, like marathon dev Q&As and
Mm-hmm.
at a weird hour because Japan, and people still really enjoy that. And then of course there's FanFest. So I think there's different ways to uh, get the point across, and maybe they can learn from what other studios decided to do, during COVID, and freshen BlizzCon up, or give it a new name even if it's you know
Like
yeah,
no longer BlizzCon,
yeah,
it's BlizzardCon.
yeah. But yeah, it's such a difference because I remember a few years ago where people were like, oh, I want an extra day of BlizzCon, and Disney World, when are we
And the
getting
tickets,
Blizzard World.
tickets
Yeah.
too, they would sell out in like a couple of minutes.
Mm,
How is it going to be now? Are tickets just going to be available forever? Like tickets still available on the day before the event. I'm
yeah.
really curious how this shift is going to how it's going to change, because another thing also, if they then decide to have a BlizzCon and it fails, that's going to look so bad. Nobody will ever try to go again. So they need to really be careful when to have the right timing of a BlizzCon as well, to make sure that it comes out right for everyone.
Yeah, I mean there's so many factors of things that they, when you look back you're like, wow, like it's a miracle like it actually work so well as it did, and now without as much goodwill, uh, you know,
It's gonna be
every
rough.
little part is going to be under scrutiny.
Yep, exactly.
And it's like, God forbid there's like not another COVID outbreak,
Yep.
or, panel mix-ups, security, someone going up in person and, protesting, like, what's your Q&A? Pay workers more.
Oh
Um,
God, yeah.
yeah. So,
I remember
yeah.
last BlizzCon too. Like you there was one. one guy who came up to mention
Yeah.
the Hong Kong stuff as well, and oh, I can't imagine what would happen now if you would have a BlizzCon. It would be a lot of people.
Yeah. And I mean, like, many of the things people are protesting would be legitimate, but I can
Oh,
imagine if you're
absolutely,
like a
but it's
corporate person,
chaos.
you'd be like, the corporate person would be like, "Oh my God, like this is a nightmare." Like, are they
Yeah.
gonna like lock them all of us in a room and demand that like we agree, or else we're being
Yeah,
on?
and also
Uh,
it's awkward for whoever the host is right now because it's not part of
yeah.
their job. It's not,
Mm.
their responsibility. So it's very awkward to be like, yeah, I agree,
Right, and
Um,
like no one knows what the future of Overwatch League is, especially with all the sponsors leaving.
mhm,
Um, it's just there are a lot of factors they really need to sort out moving forward.
mhm.
And also just the scandal of like, someone acts like they're not old school Blizzard and then they hit on fans and then like they need to make sure they have procedures in place. So it's not, oh well she was drunk. Like it needs to be like, no, like your employee, like you don't hit on people, like you don't make inappropriate jokes. Like, yes, maybe you replied to this person once on Twitter, like you're not friends, you're at a work convention. Just, you know, just be
but
professional.
but we
Yeah.
talked on Twitter once. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's
So,
true. They would have to wrap up the security so much in order to avoid any kind of scandals again.
mm. Yeah, I mean, like, we've both been to BlizzCon, like, we were working, but I think, like, you just sort of always see, like, out of the corner of your eye, like, stuff can be weird, I've had some odd, experiences, like, I think in the early years I think they were really slow to adopt a policy on, like, harassment, like, it just was sort of a free-for-all,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, no, they have to, like, have really ironclad policies on the stuff now, and it has gotten better in recent years, but it's just I think, like, there's so much more to do, with that they really need to think about,
Yep,
uh,
indeed. And I
so
think with
yeah, why
that, we
don't
can
we
move on to some
discuss
other news.
Yeah, we'll discuss the 915 stuff a bit, and then we'll circle back to industry stuff, which is actually like interesting because it's sort of tied in with the whole reactions to Blizzard now and ex-Blizzard employees. So, but yeah, 915 first. It's releasing in a week, so November 2nd US, November 3rd EU. There are customization options for allied races and a lot of quality of life improvements, um, like allied races being easier to unlock, solo island expeditions, linking transmog in game, um, easier to swap covenants, a lot of little things like that.
A lot of quality of
So,
life stuff.
yeah.
Many of which that people have been wanting for a really long time now, and that's like there's like two ways of looking at this. I think
Mhm.
for a lot of people, it's really nice, especially if you're already playing still the game. It's really nice to finally have these things. Some people are a bit more on the defense about it, like, oh, it's like a defense mechanism from Blizzard just trying to look good. But I do hope, it's hard to say now, right? But I do hope that this is something that will continuously be a thing because some of these quality of life things we've been asking forever and it took really long to get. Um, but hopefully going forward, it's something that will be more frequent as well. And even the things that were added had even more things added to it because of people feedback. For example, we had some of the hair colors that were added, then we had people from Twitter and different forums asking for more hair colors, and then 3 days later there were more hair colors that were
Yeah,
added.
the Timeout Tauren were bumped up, so that was good.
Yeah,
Um,
like so many things were added on top of additions that were not expected. So that means they took feedback, they did it, and then they got further feedback and they added that too, which is really nice if it's like
yeah.
something that continues in the future too. And like recently they mentioned the raining in cities, and then
Mhm.
people were asking, well, what about snow? And then like a day later or a few hours later they announced that we're getting snow as well. So there's definitely very fast updates right now based on feedback, and I would love to see that as a continued thing in the future as well.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of these changes, aren't, bad, but I think the timing of it is important. Like when all of these were announced, people were like, "Oh, that's great. Like covenant swapping restrictions lifted, soulbind skip, maw intro skip. Like all of this sounds good."
Skip, skip, skip.
And but it should be continuous. It shouldn't be
Exactly.
like you shouldn't have to wait months for this stuff
No.
to go into effect. Like, this
Mm-hmm.
should be a continuous improvement. And I think that the patch in November is almost pushing it a little because this patch doesn't have
Oh,
anything
absolutely.
meaty. So like if we learn about a quality of life improvement in say September and then we have to wait 2 months to get it and there's no big feature in the patch, that can not feel so great. But I do think that the changes made are a step in the right direction, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully this is like a first step to a design philosophy shift and not a quick, oh, get subs back, find the thing people complain about the most, do it and then go back to our other approach.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think like the alt friendliness and some of the stuff we'll mention with the Mage Tower about like reusing old content and designing it in a way to be evergreen, um, legacy raid tuning so you can farm things easier. I think that a lot of these things are a step in the right direction. It might be too little, too late, but I definitely think that they should go down this route, and hopefully we'll see more of in this vein for 9.2, and stuff like this will shape 10.0.
What does evergreen mean?
Oh, so Evergreen in like website terms is something that people always return to. So
Okay,
like
so
the
like a
Final
lasting
Fantasy,
thing. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so like the Final Fantasy like player housing or glamour, that would be considered evergreen cuz like you can return to
Mm,
it anytime. Or like on Wowhead, an evergreen article might be like, uh like how to unlock flying, or how to get this mount achievement. It's stuff that isn't time sensitive, and a lot of Blizzard's content is time sensitive. Like it, like artifacts, okay, we're gone. Like
borrowed
no one wants to go
powers.
back and do old stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's evergreen would be like, I'm having fun doing Brawlers Guild or playing through Suramar, or I'm gonna do the whole Final Fantasy story from start to finish over many weeks. Like that's evergreen. It's like the
Okay.
type of tree where the leaves don't fall off the tree. That's where it comes from.
Okay. So it just lasts and stays there forever. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I knew that. I was just asking for everyone else, of course. No, but that's good to know. That's good to know because that is something exactly that Blizzard has been missing, actually. I think they have been focusing a lot on the flashy, cool stuff that's only there for some time, like the artifact system and borrowed powers in general, like Covenant. I mean, can covenants be said to be evergreen in the sense that the covenants will still be there, but they won't really matter later on?
It's like the artifacts could have been evergreen if they designed them differently. Because like you have all the cool
Mm.
quests with them and rewards, but they
Mm-hmm.
did it in a way where it's like, oh, now they're broken. Like, just
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like Blizzard designed stuff where it's like disposable or like borrowed
Yeah.
power.
Which is
Uh,
such a shame because it's
yeah.
such a waste of resources too. Because
Mhm.
a lot of those quests have like I don't know, cutscenes and art and story and whatnot, all of that put together and is then thrown. Because, so I recently heard about, I don't remember what exact quest line it was, but with 9.1, there were quests that were deleted from the game that you no longer can go through. I'm not sure if you heard about it, um, which
I
means,
think we have an article for tomorrow on something happening similar in 9.1 with the Torghast quest line, that instead of the quest lines to see the story of Torghast and how Anduin ended up how he did, Boulevard just lets you see the visions of the cinematics, but they lack the full context.
exactly, yeah. So for
Yeah.
someone who's actually interested in story, they actually can't even play through it. It's like it's
Yeah.
not possible because the quests are deleted. You can go to Bolvar and see the cutscenes, but the quests themselves are just deleted. And I think it's important here for Blizzard to decide, do you want a story told or do you not want a story told? Personally, I've never been a huge story person, so these kind of things never bothered me. But reading about these things from players who are attempting to read the story and then be confused because now suddenly Anduin has, turned, um, it's um, it's not a nice feeling for those people, and also it's a waste of resources. Why did you create those quest lines and stories? Have people spend time creating them, writing them, and designing them to then just delete them.
Yeah. Like the Mop legendary cloak, like all like that character development with Rathian and Anduin, and how it's just gone. And they were clearly thinking of that when they tried to do that 8-3 cinematic where they reunite. But if you're like, oh, like that was a really interesting dynamic, why is Anduin punching Rathian? Why is he, talking about us helping him in the past? Like you wouldn't get like you couldn't go back and learn more about that stuff. So I think it would be cool if Blizzard kept more of these quest lines in the game. And I think we've said in the past how it's kind of funny how Blizzard sort of streamlined the leveling process, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, I hate questing. This is great." And then like Final Fantasy gained hype, and then it's like, "Wow, like look at this well-crafted story." And meanwhile, Blizzard is just streamlining things. So Blizzard's in
Mm-hmm.
this weird in-between position where they know some of their audience doesn't care as much about the quests, but like they're sort of alienating both groups, where if you like the
Exactly.
story,
Yeah.
you don't like it, and if you're just here to do like the end game competitive stuff, you're also not in the best mood because you're like, I hate all this borrowed power and like tuning. So it's like
Yeah.
they're sort of alienating both groups.
Exactly. It's like a really weird like middle thing where they're wasting resources on creating story that, X percentage of the gamer population doesn't even care about. And then for the people who do, it's deleted the next patch. So, Blizzard, you have to make a decision. Do you want a story or do you not want a story? And if you want it, but you don't want to cripple people who don't like it, then you need to think about how you want to put that together. And if you simply think it's not important and just get to the point, then don't make the quest lines in the first place. Make dialogues that are optional for those who want to go through them or something. I don't know. Maybe like side quests. They can be side quests and not like what's it called? They can be like not mandatory quests, and just
Right.
make them as side quests that anyone can go and pick up whenever they want to. Because this middle thing is a waste of money from their part and also a disappointment for those people who are interested in the story.
Yeah, and I mean, like, obviously, WoW and Final Fantasy can have different design approaches, but I think so
Absolutely.
many people focused on WoW for the longest time. They were like a one game player that now they're like, oh, like, you can tell a complex story in the game. It doesn't need to be like split up between all these patches and like 5 supplemental books. And I think a lot of WoW people that do like story are like, oh, like, you can you know, you can't we WoW could handle this better now that I've seen how other games handle their
Mm-hmm.
stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I think that, now people are a little disappointed about what they've, been getting from WoW if they are invested in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like or and it doesn't help that WoW has done a lot of, like surprise reveals, like always shock and awe recently, as opposed to kind of, you know, building like a story that you feel comfortable with, like, oh, surprise Elune, surprise Tyrande,
Mm-hmm.
surprise Sylvanas, cliffhangers everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Surprise the jailer, the uber villain that we've never met for, decades, but now he's behind everything, and I guess we'll defeat him in 9-2. Like it's
Yeah.
it's hard to be invested when the story, in-game storytelling, feels uh pretty thin, and then it
Mm-hmm.
gets removed.
Yeah. Exactly. I think the part where it gets removed says that in the long run, the story doesn't matter. And if that's the case, don't spend resources on making complicated stories with complicated borrowed powers. simplify it,
Yeah.
and then focus more on gameplay things. Put the resources at the right places, because right now everything is kind of thin boned,
Yeah.
or bare boned is the term. And that's not the way to do it. You can't have a broken story and broken gameplay. And hi,
Yeah,
Brightpaw.
they need to figure out their genre
Yeah,
and stick
they need to figure out
to
what the
doing
focus
something
is.
well.
Where
Or,
do they want to put all the emphasis, or most of the emphasis? Because you
yeah.
can, of course, have like side things, right? Like a lot of people say, for example, Final Fantasy does not have the greatest PvP, and like that's
Mm.
okay because it's not focused on that. So World of Warcraft is, for the most part, being said to have the better PvP among the MMOs. And if that's the case, let's put more resources on that. Like little things like that. Focus on
And I
the
think
things that you're
also,
good at.
or like looking back at the stories, I mean, WoW did not have the most advanced, like no game had the most advanced materials for some of the earlier stories, but people will still remember like iconic characters easily, and it's like maybe this, tangled up cosmic narrative does not fit, WoW's branding, or uh is not the best vehicle to tell in an MMO. Maybe this is better suited to like, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it's like maybe WoW needs to go back to telling the less tricky stories, like the more straightforward ones that are like, epic and big and have like the payoff at the end, like Burning Crusade or Wrath stories. Like, what are the iconic moments in WoW?
Mm-hmm.
Um and just sort of focus on those things that you can, like, that play to the strengths of like the MMO genre, as opposed to stories that require you to like read all these supplemental things and then you're not even sure what is like truthful and what is like, unreliable narrator, might have a
Mm-hmm.
twist in, 6 months.
Yeah.
Um
Mm-hmm.
so I do think that maybe they need to rethink their approach, that if they can't go full on with the story, figure out what is the story they can tell really well with their tools.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that the Shadowland story, for a few reasons, for the reasons you said of it being hard to follow with Skip's things being removed, Sylvanas being so caught up in mystery, no one knowing who the jailer is, the shock and awe of Teldrassil, and that kind of Blizzard like biting off too much to chew with that really dark narrative that is like not given proper attention. It just feels like very it doesn't really fit sort of the resources WoW has for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we could talk a bit about the Sylvanas book delayed, actually, because we were just talking about that, and it kind of exacerbates the problems with the
Yeah.
storytelling. How, clearly there's something big in this Sylvanas book, and it keeps getting delayed. Uh,
Probably
so
because 9.2 is getting delayed, right?
yeah, well, it's tricky, because the Sylvanas novel was first delayed from November to February 22nd, and then it was delayed again to March 29th. But it was originally meant to come out November 9th. Um, and we've seen that previously Blizzard has delayed novels to line them up with important in-game events. So, like Before the Storm, that had to be timed with the pre-patch, and Exploring Azeroth, Eastern Kingdoms, had some like interesting. I think there was like some interesting like Undercity, Arthas family references, folk and fairy tales of Azeroth. Introduced the concept of the jailer stealing part of Sylvanas' soul. So it really does stand to reason that there's something big that will be revealed uh, in Sylvanas, and they would like to have that line up with 9.2. Now, the doubt comes from um, there being a global supply chain issue in creating books.
Oh yeah, I
And
heard
this
about
is
that.
something that
Mm-hmm.
I've run into because I like reading for fun. And there's a lot of notices that you should, get your holiday shopping done now. Or if a bookstore has to order a special book, it could take up to 4 months to arrive. And it's a big, complicated thing, but basically due to COVID and a lot of books being made in Asia, and you need to create the book in person, and then there's less workers available, and you can't
Mm-hmm.
fly the books because they're too heavy. You have to use like a shipping boat to send them over. It's very it's very delayed with COVID, how there's so many steps. So
Yeah.
one could reason that maybe the smaller delay is due to COVID. But because we haven't heard anything about 9.2 yet, and 9.15 doesn't move the story forward, people, morale is not great. People are, you know, thinking of the worst possible situation, which is, oh my god, 9.2 is now going to come out on March 29th instead of February 22nd. And I think that's reasonable for people to worry about. I'm just saying that outside, many books are
There are
being
other potential
delayed as a
factors, yeah.
result of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because we also have this other Blizzard book, the Exploring Azeroth book, which is also being delayed.
Yeah, and that was meant to be out, I think, this week. And it got moved to December 7th. And
So above over a month, and this one should not necessarily be needed to line with anything in game, right?
no, I mean, there's probably like a minor-ish thing. Like reading the product description, it's all like Rexar and Zakan, uh they travel all around from the ramparts of Orgrimmar to the golden plains of Mulgore, and share one final kindness with a friend along the way. So there's
Mm-hmm.
probably like some little thing, like I don't know, maybe they visit Sourfang's grave, or we learn something that could be related to 915, or I don't know, maybe we learn like a little tidbit about Sylvanas, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be anything major there.
Yeah, yeah.
But the Sylvanas, reading the product description, let me just pull it up. Um, Looking at it, it's definitely to succeed, Sylvanas will be forced to reflect on the harrowing path that brought her to the jailer's side, and to reveal her truest self to her greatest rival. Um, we will see the moment she first beheld the Maw and understood the true consequences of what lay beyond the veil of death. As her moment of victory draws near, Sylvanas Windrunner will make a choice that may ultimately come to define her, a choice that's hers to make. So,
Mm-hmm.
that sounds like pretty big. That will actually get to see things from her perspective and
Mm-hmm.
understand. It seems like, well, that short story that it's like ancient Edge of Night, that is now under scrutiny as to, oh, that anonymous voice was actually the jailer, and those Valkyr were actually working for the jailer, not, Arthas, like all those ambiguous details, it seems, will finally have a direct telling in this book. So it seems like it will reveal a lot of information. Whether or not that information should have been kept under secrecy for several years, and hidden away in a book versus an interesting quest line is another story.
Yeah.
Going back to Final Fantasy, I think we've seen that a lot of people are like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like you can just experience like complicated lore in the game. Like you don't need to wait like 6 months to read the book.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think that people now have like higher expectations for stories you see in video games.
Absolutely. I
But yeah,
mean, for a lot of people, like for myself, for example, I'm definitely in the category of people who know and have been less involved in story and lore. In the past few years, I have been dedicating a little bit more because of doing things with you and Wowhead. But before that, I was definitely the player who would just skip through all quests and not really know exactly what's going on. I would know the main story maybe around the last boss of the raid tier pretty much, and that would be about it. And
mhm,
I wasn't even aware that there were books to read that would cover up story
yeah,
holes and all that stuff. And I think with Final Fantasy now getting a lot of attention, a lot of the people who have been interested in lore in WoW have gained a bigger voice, because now people actually listen, having experienced a story being important in Final Fantasy, and it's really interesting to see because I'm realizing like, hey, there's actually quite a few people out
It's
there who
more
are
accessible.
interested. Yeah,
Yeah, it's more accessible. It's not like, oh, well, like if you just enjoy the game, you won't understand like, 90% of what's going on. Like that to me is weird. Like it's you should be able to understand most of what's going on just by playing the game.
yeah, and for the most part, people just wouldn't even care to read anything. They just, wanted
Yeah.
to play the game with their friends. And I
Hmm.
think in that sense, WoW has for a very long time been very gameplay based,
Hmm.
and the story has been more of what you make it to be, with
Hmm.
you and your
Yeah.
friends. But
Right. But I think I was gonna say that I think that's cool when WoW sticks to, the story is what you make of it. But then it's really weird when then you're like, oh, but you're also the Maw Walker and the champion of
exactly,
Azeroth and like the
yeah.
hero, and it's like,
Yeah,
well,
when it's
if you
like this
just
in between thing
yeah,
where they don't really
yeah,
know if they should focus story or not, and then like
yeah,
make these, long quest lines explaining things, and then the next patch those quest lines are deleted.
yeah. And it's like, if I'm the hero, why do none of these characters seem to recognize me? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm this like integral character to the lore, I feel like I'm just sort of passively following these main characters around on, escort quests. Um, so it's like, if you want the story to be what you make of it, more like WoW Classic, like stick to that vibe, where,
Exactly.
but like, yeah, it's just this. I feel like if I'm meant to be the hero, I want like custom dialogues. I want to feel like my voice matters.
Mm-hmm.
I want the NPCs to recognize me. Like it's weird how like we all rescue Jaina in BFA, but then in Shadowlands it's just like, "Hail, Maw Walker, thank you." And it's like you're not gonna like talk about like what how we saved you, from
Yeah.
like the bad place in BFA, or I
Yeah.
don't know. It's
Like
just
there's no personal like relationships between the character and the character,
yeah. Yeah.
between your character and the characters in the game.
Yeah. So, but yeah,
Blizzard definitely needs to choose, Do you want to do story or do you not? If you want to do it, need a
yeah.
better red thread of things.
I mean, they've certainly gotten feedback seeing the Final Fantasy reaction as to if people like stories, this is what they like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's up to them. I mean, I think that they've, now that people are interested in other MMOs like even New World, I think Blizzard can be like, okay, we can try to spread ourselves thin, or we can commit to doing like something, a few things really well. Like what's our specialty? Um,
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
so, obviously this can't happen overnight, but I definitely think that they need to, yeah,
Yep, make
learn
that
from the
decision.
lessons of this year.
Mm-hmm. Which is
Uh,
another thing which is great with
yeah,
competition,
yeah,
more games getting more attention means that the existing games have to improve what they're doing. If what WoW has managed to do, being the top MMO for so
hmm,
many years, is incredible, and it
hmm,
shouldn't really surprise anyone that eventually the company and the direction and everything becomes complacent. Like, why would they
yeah.
improve if they don't need to?
It's also like, what does being the top MMO mean? Like so many, WoW was unique in that they try to cultivate like a one game type player. But it's like, look at how many other games are out there. Like, again, going back to being sustainable, it's like maybe due to like a free confluence of factors, they were the exception, but it's really hard to maintain that. Like, there are so many other games that people enjoy playing, franchises, and those studios have learned to deal with players coming and going. I'm pretty sure Final Fantasy has said several times, like, we want the game to be here for you. It's okay if you don't like log on every day. We don't want burnout. And I feel like Blizzard has been trying to chase people having to like log on, open their vaults every week, do something every day. RNG World Quest always popping up. That it's like,
Which is
is this a good
surprising
game?
considering
Like,
it's a 1 month subscription. Why make it
yeah,
daily logins? Like, why make it weekly
yeah,
logins if it's a 1 month subscription?
yeah. So I definitely think that, um, like they're trying to chase this like elusive user that maybe doesn't really make sense in 2021. Like every other popular game has designed themselves in a way to be popular, but doesn't require you to only play that game and
Mm-hmm.
ignore, all others of that genre.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so,
And it probably comes from these other companies, having to look at things of what they can improve to, attract more people. Whereas when you're at the top, and you are losing subs, of course. Over the years,
right.
WoW has lost subs, that's for sure. But even after losing, they would still be very high up compared to any other game. So it wouldn't really matter that much. And I think it now has probably been a big wake up call for the company to hopefully, start reassessing these things. Like,
Yeah. I
it's
think
2021, maybe, this idea that people have to play this one game on a daily basis is just not good design.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that when Blizzard did their earnings calls last year, I forget which website, but someone wasn't a WoW website, I think it was a general one, that they were saying in spite of COVID, the MAUs across Blizzard like sort of just they only held even in 2020, and if you look at it from like a 5-year perspective, that they have been declining. So Blizzard overall is not doing the greatest job pulling new players in
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
all the franchises. So it's not just
Mm-hmm.
a WoW specific issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
I
it's like
think that
maybe
problem of not being able to attract new players has been a problem. And going back to what we just discussed with those quest
mm,
lines being removed, how is a new player supposed to be able to enjoy that? And if they're not supposed to enjoy that part of the story, why were resources put in there to create them in the first place? That was
yeah, like why
clearly a
do we have
waste done.
cinematics, built into a story, and now the cinematics don't like
Makes
make as much
sense.
sense?
Yeah. I think clearly that was wasted resources that should have either just not been done or done differently.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's been some rumblings that like 10-0 will go in a different direction, and we keep seeing hiring notices for the WoW team. Maybe it's like a similar wake up from Warlords where uh they had to like, change the expansion, scrap things, and then they hired more for Legion, and we'll see like a design shift and more content. But yeah, it's sort of hard to you know, change course mid expansion, but hopefully they can learn for the future. Um,
Definitely. And
one of
with
the more positive
915,
things. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm probably going to talk about the same thing as you, as I
Yeah.
just saw it. One of the interesting things with 915, so as people know, these point 0.5 patches aren't supposed to give any content,
Hmm.
so to speak. And this update here can somewhat be seen as content after all. So we have the Mage Tower, which is coming with the time walking with 915. And while that's not really new content per se, it is a new idea of reusing old content, which is, again, something that hasn't really been done before, but is most definitely out of people's feedback and also probably the pressure from people knowing that Final Fantasy has reusable content, that we're actually getting the Mage Tower back. And we also now know that the first time it's going to be available is December 7th.
We'll run for 2 weeks. And I think that this is a little off, but there will be a rotation of
Very
18
off.
weeks. Yeah. And it's just like, why don't we just always have a time walking going?
Yeah.
Like, why? Yeah. Like, why?
18-week rotation is crazy. And I
Yeah,
think,
and like they shortened it. The patch notes say the weekly bonus events have been adjusted, and time walking now occurs every 3 weeks as opposed to every four. And it's just like,
that's
okay, why
no
can't you just make it like
difference.
one? Like 18 weeks. That's like several months. Like
Yeah.
no, just make it like always have one going. I
Yeah.
don't. I don't understand. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Always have one going. I want to be able to do Legion time walking, like put it. I mean, I would say just have it open all the time. But if
Yeah.
not that, at least one of the weeks out of 4 in a month,
Mhm.
I think should have it available. And because let's say, like, you imagine, like, you've paid for a subscription.
Mhm.
If you've paid for a subscription, you should be able to, during that time, have access to this. Not like,
Yeah.
oh, by the way, this is in 3 months. Not yet. I think that's really weird. Maybe it's an oversight because of time walking not really being that popular before or that interesting for the most part. Legion time walking is a new thing. We're getting Legion Mythic Plus as well. Maybe all this stuff is still kind of new to everything. So maybe that's why. But I would like to see the time walking to be there more often.
Yeah. Um, Also going back to using old content in a new way, the Mage Tower was finally available for testing, and Blizzard is removing a lot of abilities and effects, so you can't use them in the Mage Tower, and it's a lot of the expansion specific systems. So I think that's a really good step to thinking about, again, going back to
Yeah,
that evergreen word, like things that have
absolutely.
like staying power beyond the expansion. So for example, you can't use covenant abilities, Shadowlands legendary effects, Azerite traits, essences, um the Mop legendary metagems, the Warlord's legendary ring procs, and I think that is a good thing. Designing content that uh, will suddenly not be cheesed if a new system is added or, is broken if something like artifacts are removed. I think that this is all really good. And
Yeah,
maybe they can apply this to other stuff moving forward.
definitely. I think I saw some people being upset that they can't use, their legendaries or other things that they've worked on in order to progress the Mage Tower. But in the long run, I think this is indeed a lot better. It is a good move for evergreen content because it's also a good reminder, I think, to Blizzard themselves to have to tune something without all these extra borrowed power stuff. Maybe this will make Blizzard think twice when they, want to introduce something more that's temporary in the future expansion, for example, and focus more on these things that are cleaner, because that's basically what it
Yeah.
is. It's cleaner. It's content that's meant to be tuned forever, no matter which borrowed power is the current one, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and this announcement has actually made some people that are into like min-maxing excited to go back to old content and, like find an old piece of gear that has like extra gem sockets on it or, trinkets from past expansions that have cool procs. Like this won't suddenly make the encounter much easier, but I think some people like having like a shopping list and fine-tuning gear, and this is it's kind of cool to be able to look back at gear from all the expansions and pick and choose and farm old content. It makes it relevant again.
Mm-hmm.
So um there might be like people really like Dragon Spine trophy from Burning Crusade for some time walking challenges, and you can do it without it, but if you like farming stuff like that, this could be like a fun, side project to do in game.
Mm-hmm.
Um but yeah, so that's basically the Mage Tower news. The expansion specific stuff does not work, and you can have a little bit of fun collecting gear with lots of sockets from past expansions.
Yep.
Um So, um, next we have some interesting news from the classic side, which kind of has a parallel to the Mage Tower in that it's how do we take content we've already made that has like positive reception and uh give it more like reusability. And I think when we last spoke about Season of Mastery, we were saying that it was like an interesting idea, but Blizzard sort of didn't go far enough in making it unique. And Blizzard seems to be doing a bit more, which I think is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, one of the things that they are doing is that they are adding a mechanic called Soul of Iron, which is basically hardcore support. Um, which means that you can't die. You get this special buff. Um, showing that you have gotten so far without dying. Um, you can speak to NPC to turn it on and off. And this might lead to incentives to have groups that are trying to clear hardcore content in Season of Mastery. And I
Can you
believe
turn
we've
it on whenever you want to?
um well, I mean, I think if you let's see. So far it seems that you can do, 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 do. When you are tarnished by death, all stats are reduced by 1%.
Mm-hmm.
Um so that's not great, and you have like a debuff of shame, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and you can't really cheat the mechanic.
Okay, yeah,
Um
basically that's the part I was
yeah.
wondering about because that's good. I think it's actually really exciting for Blizzard to do something like this. It's part of what has honestly caught my attention a little bit. I'm not really a classic player, and
Mhm.
I did play through classic. Went through all the different raid tiers and everything. I think the only one I didn't play much was Nax, and that was due to Shadowlands being out around the same time.
Yeah.
But this is interesting. Having a hardcore version of the game is because I remember creating characters in the past with
Mhm.
add-ons to make it possible to link your character to like a website that checks if you've
Yeah.
used a potion or if you've died or if you've done this or that, and having something similar to that with an actual in-game mechanic of hardcore is actually really exciting. I think that's a cool thing, especially because in classic it's difficult to level. Things are quite tough. So being able to get through everything, playing solo, and having that hardcore thing, even as some kind of stream content as well, I think can be really exciting.
Yeah, and then yesterday they seem to added some data mine spells that are called like Survivor, Survivor of the Fire Lord, Shadowflame, Old God Damned, and how they all use this Survivor name. People think that this could be a way of tracking if you've defeated like Molten Core, all the way through Nax
Mm.
without ever dying. And then
Mm-hmm.
people are like, oh, like can you do Veil without dying, or some of the later um raids could get quite challenging. So this seems to have generated some positive hype around it. And even in this big list of data mining, there's even hints that they could be nerfing the solo farming spot in Maradon, as well as Blackrock Depth's pickpocket bots with a spell called Thief. So it seems that by freeing themselves to think outside of the box, that they're leading to more changes that are getting people hyped, that capture the spirit of things, as opposed to like sort of creating this museum replica that's not as hype for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
um and the
Um,
big news, sorry, go ahead.
I was probably going to say the same thing, so you go ahead.
All right, so the big news was that Blizzard did raid testing for Molten Core and Onyxia with a few changes, and then they made this blue post saying that um they are going bigger. Merely
Yep,
raising mob health and restoring a few removed mechanics was not hitting the mark we wanted for a season focused on faster progression and more challenging content. So they are making significant adjustments to almost every encounter in Molten Core and Onyxia's Lair.
that's exciting
Yeah, I think that
to see some
is
added
really good.
mechanics. And they specified that they don't want to change things too much to, for the
Mhm.
boss to not feel like, this is what the boss is. And I'm really curious what the classic community thinks of this, but from an outside point or from a more casual stance on classic, I think it sounds interesting. And with casual, I still mean that, like I said, I did play through everything,
Right.
but casual in the sense that I'm not really still playing much. So I think it's interesting. to see how this will go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm seeing that there are some concerns about class balance because people are like, well, if the encounter is more difficult, then that means that there will be more melee
Good
instead of range
point.
because,
Mm-hmm.
people will be limited by mana. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you don't just want to bring classes that have durability. So maybe who knows? Maybe this will lead to class tuning
Potential
or mana
class tuning.
changes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
How will that be
Um.
received? I think it's almost
Yeah.
necessary. I mean, if they are making
Yeah.
things harder, you don't want it to be like, well, only rogues and warriors are
Yeah.
invited.
Only warrior. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, you still want it to be possible to have casters too, and especially because of the shorter cycle too. Because for a lot of casters like warlocks, they scale really well with gear. So not
Yeah.
having gear means that they're going to be really weak and just never
Yeah.
invited.
Right. And then because it's also a shorter cycle, it's, shorter for leveling, time to level alts, gear alts up, lots of different factors
Mm-hmm.
going on there. So, the raid testing for this enhanced version has not yet happened, but if they do the raid testing and there's only warriors and rogues, then
Yeah, I
uh
guess they'll see with that. Mm-hmm.
yeah. But I do think people seem happy that Blizzard is trying to do uh, more drastic things this time around. Um, so they're trying something. It's better than not trying anything, and these seem to be more well received than whatever they did with TBC, which was just sort of like, oh, some changes, cash shop. That did
Yeah.
not really go over well. Um,
Some
so
changes, a boost.
yeah, a boost and something confusing with drums going on, and then
Mm-hmm.
the paladin seals being equal. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that if they do something bold, like we were saying that Shadowlands needs to like commit to being something. So I feel like Classic is trying to sort out like,
What
we're
does
gonna
it want
go
to
in
be?
one specific direction. Like, yeah, what do we want to be? Like, are we trying to be purist? Are we trying to do something more drastic that could actually attract one specific type of player? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that they have more experimenting to do, but it's a positive step. So
Mm-hmm. It's definitely more changes than I expected. So I expected like a experience revamp and things like that, but I didn't
yeah,
expect like a hardcore little mechanic, and I didn't expect them to add more mechanics to bosses either. So I think
yeah,
I think it's a positive because some people have suggested some really cool ideas from how other games have done it, like RuneScape. But because of the very strong sense of hashtag no changes, I expected Blizzard to be a bit more careful with that. I mean, and maybe they are as well. But I think this is a good few steps towards trying something new and fresh with classic. Because I could see that becoming a cool thing, like a sort of seasonal thing. A new season, this is how this season is, and then the next season would be something different.
yeah.
Maybe different
I could
mechanics or
also
something else.
going back to the lack of BlizzCon, I could also see how um if they want to announce this when it's ready, maybe they don't need to announce this the exact same day that we get like a Shadowlands update, because it seems that there are two very different audiences being targeted here. If Shadowlands is like, look, alt friendly, and this is like super difficult challenge, and yeah, it's just as another factor why you don't need to just dump all the WoW news on the same day. You can release things when it makes sense. And by February, who knows, maybe this will be out by then, or you know, they'll have something else to announce, and it wouldn't make sense to like delay all this news for 3 months, so we're like, oh no, can't
Mm-hmm.
say hardcore is in November. We have to wait until February. So I think that by not having the BlizzConline, it gives them greater flexibility to announce things earlier, and get player feedback, so it's in better shape when it launches, as opposed to like saying nothing and then like dropping all this news that this is how it is and people are upset but they have no time to change it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, uh, did you
Yeah.
have
Well,
anything else to say? Go
no,
ahead.
I think with
Yeah.
that we can move on to some more industry news.
Yeah, again, sort of tying back to the sort of the Blizzard reaction to things. There was an announcement that there's a new video game startup company headlined by all former World of Warcraft Blizzard employees. They are called Notorious Studios. The name has been taken from the 17-year-old gaming guild that many of them played together in. And based on the announcement video, it will be focused on building the next great multiplayer RPG game world. And they seem to be based in California, talking about a hybrid in-person office model. One of the former Blizzard developers had like a very highly publicized departure video last year, talking about the issues with modern WoW's development. It's gotten a lot of attention. Investors like Riot Games, has invested in it, and it definitely seems promising. But what stood out to me is how very similar announcement to past ex Blizzard studios like Frost Giant and Lightforge, but saying we're all former WoW developers in October 2021 did
Is
not
not,
get
yeah.
it's a lot of people seemed very skeptical or hesitant. They're saying, oh, will you know, you were at Blizzard when there were all these problems, what's
Yeah.
your HR like? Were you
Mm-hmm.
part of the problem? Oh,
Yeah.
systems developers,
Did you
were
know of
you
Cosby
like the
Suite?
board? Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
a lot of people were also being very critical, being like, oh, you're all these studios are saying they don't want to be like Blizzard, but they're the people are scrutinizing like the employee thing. They're noticing that there's like no women that are featured on their website. They're located in a very similar area to Blizzard in Southern California, saying they want to work in person. So there's definitely been a sense of is this really, people are more skeptical now, and it's not a bad thing, but it's just sort of interesting to see that people are scrutinizing this announcement more after the Blizzard
Absolutely.
issues have come to light in a
Mm-hmm.
way that
Yeah.
the past studios haven't been.
Yeah, because last year and well, in the last couple of years or whenever, when these little companies popped up with ex Blizzard, I was like, that's great, that's awesome. That's we know that these people are talented, and if they're getting out of Blizzard, maybe that's because they feel they can't really affect Blizzard's direction. So if they work at their own company, maybe they'll create some great things. But now it's a little bit like more skepticism, which, like you said, doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. But I think people are definitely going to be a lot more, actually judging what the product will be instead of just like blindly sort of idolizing it, the way that Blizzard devs have been idolized in the past.
Like, I feel a lot of ex Blizzard companies would try to sort of build on the Blizzard distrust and say, "Oh, look, we're former Blizzard. We are, we're the good people." And now people are like, "Oh, like, are you just sort of continuing with
Yeah.
the rock star
Mm-hmm.
culture? Like, were
Mm-hmm.
you complicit and now you want greater freedom?"
Mm-hmm.
Um, like something I see memed a lot is that like the only like woman on the website is the dog who is the chief morale officer, Ellie, and it's just like
Yeah, I noticed
it's like
too.
going back to the lack of PR. It's like the dog is cute, but like did you guys like think that think of all the bad PR scenarios that could have come up by doing something like this?
Like
Or
in this, in this time, in this space of
yeah.
all the scandals that happened, then it is a little bit funny. um
Yeah, and,
the
like,
only
it
woman
like
on
I
the
said, a
team
lot
is a
of these
dog.
studios are all like, "Oh, like, we're not like Blizzard," but it's like, show us. Like, none of these small studios have put out a game yet. A lot of them say, "Oh, we're not like Blizzard," but it's like, well, do you have better HR or better pay? You're still located in the exact same area. You seem to be a fan of going into the office. Um, So, all these places need to show actions, not just words, had that they were different from Blizzard.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And
And
also, in large ways, people used to think that Blizzard is great, but the big bad one is Activision, right?
right.
So anything bad that happens at Blizzard is actually Activision's fault. And I think this year is when people started questioning Blizzard directly, and not just the Activision big head, but actually Blizzard. And I think that's the part that also makes people a bit more skeptical with these new companies popping out. But I mean, a lot of people are supportive, of course,
Yeah.
especially with some of the names that have been more involved with other people in social media. Um, so I think they can still be, pretty well received, but people definitely are going to be more judgmental and keep
Yeah.
an eye out on what's going on.
Yeah, like the developer who worked on the Shadow Priest revamp, as well as Monks and Mr. Pandaria. Um, when he left Blizzard last year, he did a very well received video, talking about pillars of the game he feels has been muddled over time, including we were just talking about the some oddities with the stories in WoW, and
Mm-hmm.
he was basically saying that the narrative in modern WoW is great, but it marks a shift in storytelling that decenters the player from the narrative, and like you're not the center of the story; it's these like NPCs you're just watching, and he also feels that modern WoW spends too much time on progression systems versus
Yeah.
core systems that are social that only an MMO can specialize in, and that there's this clash of different opinions between the modern WoW team that affects the direction. So you definitely those sentiments definitely resonated with a lot of players last year. Um, and I do think that, the studio has promise. It was just interesting to, uh, notice the reaction compared to very similar announcements made right before the lawsuit came out.
Yep. And then more industry news on the lawsuit itself. We had a
Yeah.
recent news article talking about how Blizzard confirmed having cleared 20 employees from the company.
Yeah, they said that more than 20 individuals have been
More than
fired for
20.
misconduct, and
Mm-hmm.
another 20 are facing disciplinary action, with more changes promised to come. Several things were interesting. The first was that they didn't say who was fired, which has led people to wonder, you know, we don't know who is responsible. Like, what happens if they pop up at a new ex Blizzard studio, or, um, a junior person at another AAO company wouldn't know that someone was fired from Blizzard. So I think it's a little strange that they're not sharing the names of these people. Um,
Hmm.
like I don't think it's great for newer people in the industry not to know. Like you have to rely on this like whisper system of being like, oh, that person didn't leave, they were fired. So I think that's a little strange.
Do you
The other
think
thing, which yeah, go ahead.
do you think they have that responsibility? Like, I'm not sure how things work in the corporate world, but can it be almost like if they tell people that they fired this person for misconduct, it could be like I don't know, potential slander or some kind of sue system. Like, how does that stuff work?
I'm not an expert at that, but I almost wonder that. I mean, would it already have if someone wanted to sue? Would Blizzard have given them enough ammunition by Blizzard saying, "Oh, we fired people for misconduct," and then that person has like a private email being like, "You're fired." Like, I feel like maybe that could be enough for someone to be like, "Oh, you fired me unfairly." Um, but I don't. It from an outside perspective, it definitely seems weird with all the talk of transparency. Uh, not to not to reveal who these people are,
Mm-hmm.
and it's on both sides of things. Like you don't want someone that's new to the industry to be um taken in by someone that was a predator. And then,
Oh,
going back to this
absolutely.
this game studio,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen comments where people are like, "Oh, funny timing, is this formed by, X, are these studios populated by people that were fired? I don't know if I should support them. And I don't think the studios are, but it definitely has this ambiguity because people don't want to, support companies that are knowingly like hiring and like protecting these individuals.
Yeah. I'm just wondering from like a
Yeah.
point of view where, let's say somebody did harass at the
Hmm.
company, and now the company goes out with saying that, maybe that person's reputation will be tarnished forever, even if they,
Yeah.
kind of like a criminal who's like
Right.
forever seen as a criminal. Maybe there's like some kind of laws against that so that they're not allowed to do that to them. I'm not sure exactly how this
Yeah.
stuff works. I mean,
It's
maybe it's
also
different because
tricky.
there is an
Yeah.
investigation going on.
Yeah, like it's also tricky because apparently in this interview with the Financial Times, Townsend, which I'll get to, uh, said that
I still can't believe they still use her as
yeah,
like, oh no. But
she
yeah.
she made a distinction that differences were made between patterns of misconduct, like frequent misconduct, which warranted immediate termination, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to a one-off instance, which could be rectified with disciplinary action. So it seems like if
Okay.
someone had one issue that like maybe they would just have time off for training, and if you were fired it was like um consistent behavior. um
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it's just a really tricky, situation. Like you do raise good points, and it's just, it's ultimately Blizzard's fault by, creating this culture that generated so many employees that
Mm-hmm.
behave badly as the
and
status
and
quo.
I don't mean that it's right to protect people.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
just wondering
right.
if it is
Yeah.
possible for them to then backfire back and be like, hey,
Oh
you
yeah.
destroyed my entire career. I cannot
Yeah,
get
it's
a
not
job
ethics. It's
anymore.
like right, no, yeah, it's
So
more
I don't know how
like
that stuff works.
you can picture a corporate person being like, "Oh no, we can't say who we let go because we don't want any more lawsuits." And, they're not even thinking about what's right or wrong. They're just like, "Oh, like paperwork, legal advice, don't name names." Um, but yeah, it's it basically
It does feel safer. It does feel
yeah.
better if I can
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
if these people were left the company because of bad things. But
Mhm.
I am curious if that is something that's, allowed to be done.
Yeah. Um, she did clarify that they included several game developers and a few supervisors,
Mm-hmm.
but no one was targeted that was on the company's board or senior management.
Okay.
She also wrote an internal letter that was republished, um, and basically saying that they're investigating team resources, um, ethics and compliance, team leadership. They're still looking into reports that can be submitted anonymously. Um, improving training resources, um, ongoing investigation, and basically saying that there's still more work to be done as far as hiring and improving
Mm-hmm.
transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's funny, right, Paul? What are you doing? What I find funny is that it's Frances Townsend who was the one that was under fire in the first place by minimizing all of this. Who
Being
later
tone
then claimed
deaf.
that yeah, she later made it seem like a legal department told her what to say. But regardless, she even if she didn't come up with it, she clearly thought this was the right thing to say and didn't push back.
Yep.
So it's just funny how it's
So
like,
I
well,
can't really take her word serious on anything either.
yeah, it's hard to, and it's funny how it's like, oh, we got rid of the employees, but no one from senior management or the board resigned, and it's like, well, aren't you technically like a supervisor as well? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it's she did step down as the sponsor of the Women's Network, which I think is a
Mm-hmm.
good step. But yeah, I don't know if she's the best spokesperson for this because
Yeah,
a
I
lot
don't
of
think so
trust has
either.
been a lot
Yeah.
of trust has been lost with her and the employees and players as a result of that initial first statement.
Mm-hmm.
So
Indeed. And there's also an earnings
yeah,
call next week.
yeah, November 2nd. So that should be fun times. It's also
Oh.
interesting because we haven't really heard much from the two co-leads. Jen, um, and Quick. And I know Quick on his social media was trying to be more open, and then he got some backlash talking about boosting. And I think Jen has been more behind the scenes doing stuff like overseeing Diablo and Overwatch. So we haven't really gotten many official
No
statements
official
from them
statements from them, right? Yeah.
as to what they are doing at Blizzard. What is Blizzard's new relationship to Activision? What is their approach to changing things? What are they focusing on?
Mm-hmm.
People are hungry for information. I think that's why they eat up all these, little things when, Mike Quick is like, oh, here's my rank or I'm streaming. But we haven't really heard anything about their management styles.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure the questions they will be answering may not all be relevant to us as, they talk to investors who can kind of sound like soulless robots that are like, they asked some weird questions last quarter that did not seem to be very empathetic to the employees, but
Yeah.
I think it would be good to hear them speak regardless of the questions they get from, the not gamer investors.
Mm-hmm.
And Bobby will have to do his opening intro as well as explain why there's no BlizzCon and put a positive spin on MAU, and I guess we'll see how drastic the MAU loss was. Like we also I think this was recent. They announced that there was going to be like the bulk discounts. I thought like the transfers coming pretty soon.
Hmm.
So people were joking that maybe WoW lost a lot of subs if they're finally making it easier to transfer servers as a group.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? I think that was like maybe not last week, but maybe the week before. Oh yeah, bulk character transfer bundle coming to WoW. We intend to offer bundles of realm to realm character transfers for a discounted total price in a future update. You can select multiple characters on the same account
That's
and
never
move
been a
them
thing,
to a
right?
destination home. Sorry?
That's never been a thing, right?
Correct. Never been a thing.
Hmm.
Um, so I wonder if we're gonna suddenly hear more information on this, or if we'll be part of the earnings call. Like we saw lower MAU with the lawsuit and blah blah blah, but
Mm-hmm.
plans to grow back involve new technology for bulk transfers. Stuff like that. I wonder if we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna start hearing big news because we can't forget that before the last earnings call, we suddenly had like J. Allen Brack resigning and a bunch of other, you know, staffing changes leading up to the
Mm-hmm.
last call. So I imagine there will be some surprising news
Mm-hmm.
to placate the investors, try to get the stock prices going up again.
I think it's really interesting. I can see some comments in the chat as well. Oh, they finally adding that. Finally, it's possible to server change with all my tunes.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see something like this, which has probably been asked for years, but was
Yep.
just never prioritized because it's not important. And I feel like we're seeing a lot of those kind of things. Things that people have been asking for a long time is finally being added, even if it's not necessarily been mentioned recently. But it's
Mhm.
as if they have like a library of changes that has been
Yeah.
mentioned by community and then just like closed the doors to that, you know? And then
Yeah.
now it's like, you know what? I think now it's time to get to that shelf and those cupboards and look through it, all those things that people have been asking for the past 5+ years, 10 years, maybe even, to
Even the
have
group
something like
finder
this.
changes. Like people are like, I don't want to see just, bots and sellers, and I want to actually find a group or
Yeah.
better reporting systems. It's like all of a sudden people have wanted these for years, and now this lawsuit, people are like, oh yeah, like this, you know, it's just,
Yeah.
or like the customization, like Blizzard's like, oh no, actually we're gonna add more customizations, even though we said we were stopping the customizations. Um, all of a sudden people are now,
Yeah,
it's
that's true
not
as
tied to
well.
the lawsuit, but it suddenly became the time for people to be like, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Blizzard suddenly, I guess this was just a PR move. They actually don't care about diversity. Like, they don't care about customization. Check out these other 10 games that have amazing customization.
Yeah.
Um,
And then Blizzard's like, oh, we have to care.
right.
Otherwise, people will play the other games instead of our games. So, all right, okay, let's bring the checklist of things that people have been asking for, and let's start adding them in. And
Yeah,
I
maybe
mean,
that's
hopefully,
another
it's a
reason.
continuous thing for the future too. Then it's not a bad thing, right? But it is a
Mhm.
bad thing if it only happens now because it's one of the couple patches right after the lawsuit. But if it's something that continues in the future, then it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's also like that could be another reason why they think BlizzConline is a risk. Like, you have to give everyone the right media training. You have to train people to reply in ways that don't annoy the player base, knowing that every little word will be scrutinized. And it's also like if you ask something and they say, oh, no plans, people are like, okay, no customization, and then it feels awkward when they change their mind. So maybe they're just like, let's just develop games and respond in like a fast way to feedback and not make these sweeping statements that could, make people upset, or now we feel like we have to commit to something and then we change our minds a month later.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I definitely feel like what I remember the most of BlizzConline was no customization options. Like I think that was like the
Yeah,
PR point I remember the most, and that was not positive.
it's like, nope, we're not planning to add any more customization during
Yeah.
Shadowlands. And 6 months later, here we are, lots of customization. Even snow
Yeah.
added to cities, like really small, random, almost things that people have asked for but was not important, has now been taken in consideration. And I think it's interesting to see that.
But yeah, I just feel like BlizzConline, for even beyond the major reasons we spoke about, like the little things, the relatively small things of, people maybe misspeaking or not being precise enough, and fans get disappointed in announcements when they should just, be maybe trying out small changes or teasing ideas and, gathering feedback and doing surveys. Like, that could be a better use of their time, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to like, oh, after 3 months of not saying anything,
Mm-hmm.
uh, here's all this info. Maybe some of you won't like it. You'll be disappointed. I just think that that's not the approach you know, that it makes sense right now. Like, smaller
Yeah.
reveals and adjusting based on feedback is better than like, well, here you go. We've sat on this long enough. Take it or leave it. We've passed our deadline. So I
Mm-hmm.
hope you like this. I think that's better. Like, it was
Mm-hmm.
always an issue at BlizzCons. Remember how with Warlords they were talking about, like, there was gonna be big capital cities, um, and like, Shadow Moon Valley. Like, there was definitely, um, I maybe Shatrath would be rebuilt. Like, it was a lot. It was promises for capital cities that did not materialize, and people were disappointed. And I think at the time
Yeah.
Blizzard was like, oh, we feel bad when we make statements about
Yeah.
what's coming, and then
Yeah. And then it's
we have
taken
to
back.
say something, like, we had to prepare major announcements for BlizzCon, and then
Mm-hmm.
people get disappointed when it doesn't work out. And it's like, even if we didn't have all these scandals, it's like, yeah, that is a problem. Like,
Yeah.
how they have to, you know, make promises that they can't necessarily keep, or announce things without doing the proper research. Like, it is a bit, it does, as people are more sophisticated, some parts don't totally make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's
Absolutely.
like Blizzard does not have enough goodwill, so they can't do another like 9-2 will have this, oh, JK, it's not coming. Like that, they do not need to have one of those situations.
Mm-hmm.
And like interviews as well, like, can you imagine like every interview would just be like, like, about the lawsuit, or
Oh yeah.
Or like, why
Yeah.
do you have own situation? Like, you could just imagine people going rogue and just being upset with the lawsuit, and just having hijacking a Q&A about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
No,
yeah,
I would imagine a lot of especially the Q&A, you know, when people walk up to the microphone, even if they
yeah,
have like pre-decided questions, like they would
yeah,
ask something else. Are you turning another lady into a fruit of bowl? Wait,
yeah.
bowl of fruit.
Yeah, I like
uh,
the fruit of yeah.
fruit of bowl.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely a very different situation now, which would be
Yeah.
risky to have a BlizzCon in the old ways at least.
Yeah. For a final industry point, which we kind of alluded to earlier, talking about the incident at BlizzCon associated with someone that was renamed.
Yeah,
There's been, as usual, more minor renames, but the biggest one is that Jesse McCree is now Cold Cassidy. He will be renamed on October 26th, and Blizzard is also letting you change your battle tag and sort of in like to go along with the RP celebration. Maybe you want a new name change as well.
yeah. Maybe you named your BattleNet after the champion, for example.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
mm-hmm.
Um, and they try to give it like a little bit of an RP spin that, like he gave up his name long ago, he's running from his past and he's running from himself. Um, and now he has to make a stand, and he has to be honest with himself. So, I think that's, they did it in a classy way, I think. Uh, so,
I mean, in the
you know,
best way that it could
yeah.
have been done. I mean, obviously, it's very
Yeah.
awkward and should not have been the case in the first place. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's just like, just don't name things after real life people, especially when, but again, it's like, where was the PR? Like a lawyer would have been like, okay, so you're gonna name like the billboard character after
that's the thing. It's
an
a billboard
employee.
character. Like
Oh,
there's boxes made of this NPC. You know, there's
yeah.
merch. There's so many things. It's different if
Yeah,
it's an
like the
NPC in WoW or
merchandise.
something. But
It's like, so you're gonna like sell statues of this character named after a random person, and we're not gonna do like background checks or like go through
mm-hmm,
HR things like that. Just seems like such a risk in retrospect. It's like no one thought to be like, this is a potential like PR like disaster waiting to happen. It's just like
mm-hmm,
no one thought of this.
mm-hmm,
And now we have this situation.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
for anyone who might have just tuned in, I saw a question of who we are talking about. We're talking about the champion called McCree in Overwatch.
yeah,
Is it called champion? Maybe it's a hero.
hero.
It's a hero. The
Mhm.
hero in Overwatch. So Overwatch is obviously different from World of Warcraft, where you have main heroes and you play as the heroes. So they're very central to the entire game. It's not like an NPC in the game. It's the actual hero that you play. So having a hero like that named after an employee is quite risky because they are a huge part of the game branding in general, as it's put on merch and cinematics and things like that. Whereas in WoW, if you put a name on an NPC, which has caused a bit of rocky things as well,
Mhm.
it's still not as serious. You can remove an NPC. People who know about it may notice it. People who don't know about it won't notice it. In this case, everyone will notice that this hero is suddenly called something else.
Yeah, like,
Even if they don't like know anything about what's going on, they'll still be like, "What happened here? Why has my favorite hero changed name?"
yeah.
It's quite a big deal that they
Yeah,
named
like
it after somebody.
casters have to announce like the name, like, oh, who is this, player going to pick, like the merch, t-shirts, like it's a big deal.
Yeah,
And yeah, Blizzard, you know, they will have to learn from their mistakes and not
yeah,
replicate this. And it's good they announced that they're changing the policy with it, so it's not like, oh, well, this guy was bad, but like this person's nice, maybe they'll get an NPC in the future. It's just like, no, like we should just name characters based on does this name make sense in our universe and not, you know, do some like huge egotistical thing like this.
Yeah. And
So
that was all the story points that we wanted to go over, or news points, not story points. I
yeah.
think that about wraps it up. We've had quite a bit of discussion, even though I didn't think that we had that many news points.
Yeah, the BlizzCon I think just like really sort of like tied it all together, like sort of reflecting like the ongoing branding frustrations and like the story frustrations and the 915 delays. Like it just made it all, it was like a microcosm for all the smaller issues in the other stories. Brightpaw, why are you, oh, he's rubbing his head against the mic.
I'll take some more comments in the chat.
Yeah.
What about the Make-A-Wish NPCs? Yeah, like I said, I think having NPCs in the game in general, I think they might have made it a policy now to not do it at all because they try to, be so so safe that it's best to just not do it. But in general, I think that having NPCs in general is an okay thing to do to commemorate something like a Make-A-Wish thing, and even employers to some extent, as long as it's not like employees, as long as it's not one employee getting 20 different NPCs, I think it's okay, to put them in a little side area somewhere so that they can have their little corner. I think it's quite nice. Like I know some friends in the community as well who've been given NPCs like Jay the Bard, for example, and I think that's really nice. And if something would happen, it's quite easy to remove that one NPC without it affecting the entire game. Yeah, I
I
think
can
that's the way
see
I
why they
see it.
might say if legal is like flooded with policies, they may say like, let's go easy on this until we sort out our big problems and then let's
Yeah, it
come
might be
up
one of those
with a
things. Maybe
yeah.
just no
Like
NPCs will be added for some time because of like all the chaos with everything, and then maybe they'll come up with a way of doing things in like a year or two.
yeah, like I remember in the Warlords beta, like there were some community references and then like they got deleted and then the people were sad that, found them in the beta and like that didn't feel good and it kind of seemed like people were just sort of naming things based on like the circles of the WoW community they knew. So it's like maybe there should be a more like top-down organized approach where like if you wanted to name something after someone similar to Jay the Bard, like I don't know, like develop like some the person should submit a request being like, this is the NPC, this is like the IRL person, and this is why I want to do it, and then like a neutral third party could approve it.
Exactly.
So it's more organized that way.
Yeah, I
And
think that's really nice. And I see
yeah.
a comment in the chat as well about how he says, I think there should be room for tokens and Easter eggs in games. I've seen lots of hidden gems in WoW, not only to IRL people, but also references to other games or universes, etc. And I agree. I completely
I
agree
think
with
that's
that.
nice as well. Yeah.
I think at the moment it just went overboard because having Jesse McCree as the literal name of the hero is not really an Easter egg or hidden in any way. It's like
Or
right
like
there in your
the
face.
being like, I will be the inspiration for the foundational zone of the Draenei. Like it wasn't as obvious, but it's like, you know, if you're trying to build lore, maybe you shouldn't build it on like someone's name that also could be used as a cowboy.
I
Like
mean,
it's
and
yeah.
also just one person should not have their name in so many different places either. Like we
Yeah.
had that case with Frasiabi, where
He was
he
everywhere.
had an NPC or several NPCs, several quests, several items. It should be like one special NPC to commemorate the person for everything they've done for the company. And if things go really bad, then it's easier to just remove that one thing instead of having to dig through and delete like 20
Yeah.
different things.
Like something I thought was really clever, which has not been changed, is that um a lot of the NPCs in the early part of Culling of Strathholm that are trying to calm down the civilians with the grain. I think they were based on customer service reps back in the day, which is clever because it's like a tribute to how like they just get yelled at and they're trying to restore
Oh,
order.
yeah,
But like it wasn't exactly their names. It was like I think it was a mix of like their online handles or they were like
yeah.
adapted to sound more RP. And I don't think those have been changed yet, but like I think that's like a nice like that's an Easter egg
Absolutely.
where like to a person it's not like, oh, like this is breaking the lore, but if you
No.
were that rep, you'd be like, oh, like this is sort of like the like
Mm-hmm.
in-game version of my job. So
Yeah. Game version of my job. But it's like being in the
yeah.
credits of a game, except you're in the game. And
Yeah.
I think that's cool. I think it is a really nice thing to do. And I I do hope that Blizzard will come to a place where they can do that again, but with, you know, a bit more, not restriction, but a bit more like organization around how it's supposed to be done.
Yeah. Like again, sort of going back to ego, you don't want one person being like, "Oh, look, I'm so powerful. I'm going to, just put 20 items in as a reference to my friends." Like that,
Yeah.
it should be more balanced.
Yeah. I mean,
So
because also another thing to note is that the person who was she directing the voicing? I'm not sure, but about the Macquarie island or zone, she talked about
wait,
how she specifically directed the voice actors to pronounce it in a different way so it doesn't sound like the name. So, like,
yeah.
needing to be put in that situation where it's so awkward that you don't want it to sound like somebody's name, like, at that point, you know, maybe it shouldn't be called somebody's name. Maybe it's awkward
Yeah,
and
or it's like or things Blizzard has retconned over the years, like couldn't they have been like, okay, so yes, like 12 years ago we made this joke that the Draenei came from like this guy's last name, but like it's like they could have just changed the name then, but they didn't want to, just Blizzard collectively did not want to offend this person, so they just had to like double down on this sort of
yeah,
throwaway jokey thing from over a decade ago.
yeah.
Like, we were just talking, like, how many things have they retconned in recent years? Like Chronicle or like Story Shock and all. It's like I'm sure they could have just, you know, changed the name of the zone instead of being like, oh, we can't make, this guy sad. We gotta
Mm-hmm.
deepen like the connection to his name in this game. Give him, a few more references.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but yeah. So I think that's
Yeah, I think
about
that's
it. But
about
yeah,
it.
happy.
I'd like to quickly give a shout out to all subs and resubs from the stream. We have Colnaris with a 6-month resub, Aegis with a very long 45-month resub, Vixero, new sub, Taylor, 18 months, Noma, 15 months, and Nixton with a prime sub as well. Thank you very much for the
Yeah.
support to Wowhead. And yeah, with that, we are off for this week. And hope you guys have a great rest of the week and maybe celebrating Halloween, which is coming up as well. And we'll be back next week, hopefully.
Yeah, Bright Paul's right here. Let me see if I can pick him up so we can say goodbye.
Yeah.
Aw, okay. He's gonna help us say goodbye, aren't you? All right.
Big
So,
boy. Yeah.
come on, Bright Paul.
Yeah,
Wave goodbye.
perfect. There we go. Time to
Yeah.
wave goodbye. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone. And we'll see you
Bye.
all next time. Thank you guys very much
Yep.
for supporting and hanging out and, yeah, just being awesome. And we'll see you
Yep.
all again next week. And
Yep. Happy
also,
Halloween.
also
Good.
really good chat today. Very civilized discussions, which is always nice to see. And yeah, we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.